Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Wednesday, middle of the week, and another great saint today. For goodness sake, this month is just crazy great with wonderful saints. Today it's Saint Francis de Chantal. Pray for us, of course, and the spiritual direction of Saint Francis de Sales. It's a great story there. Coming up on the program today, we are going to be talking about a new seminary in the Kansas Diocese. That's right out of the gate. Excited about this. A Diocese of Wichita announcing last week that the bishop is formally establishing St. Philip Neri Seminary, named for the 16th century priest and founder of the Congregation of the Oratory, who helped to revive both the clergy and church during the Counter-Reformation. So it's always exciting to hear of more wonderful places where we can send men to discern the priesthood. So we'll talk about that with the good bishop from the Diocese of Wichita. At the bottom of the hour, we are going to take you back to Assisi because, of course, yesterday being the big feast day of St. Clare of Assisi, there's a beautiful article on the Catholic News Agency about the saint. You can check that out. Actually, EWTNnews.com is the recent website. Same great news, but different website title. So there's a list of the different facts that you may not know about the great St. Clare, but we are going to talk about two things. I mentioned this in 2 cents yesterday. We're going to talk about when she was named the patron of television and why, and it happened actually all the way back in 1958. But there are two very specific reasons why this happened. We'll explain. And then we are going to share with you another one of our installations from our Unknown St. Francis series, our Mission Advancement Learn series, The Unknown St. Francis. And it's 8 parts, all filmed on location in Tuscany, Lazio, and Umbria. And I'm very proud of this series. It's beautifully done. The network worked really hard on it. Just beautiful, beautiful images. And you can learn more about the holy friendship between St. Clare and St. Francis. And we'll play that segment for you this morning in our Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, which is based on my 2 books by that same name, Italy's Shrines and Wonders Volume 1 and Volume 2. Italy's Shrines and Wonders Volume 2 is all about discovering sacred spaces and fascinating places in the life of St. Francis of Assisi. Both available. They're published by EWTN, so of course, both available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. And then, of course, it's a Wednesday, so we will stay in Italy, but go further south to the region of Lazio in Rome. And Joni and I emailing it back and forth. Of course, Joan Lewis from Joan's Rome joining me, as she always does on a Wednesday, telling me they're in the triple digits now, or will be, probably are by now, because in Italy it's 3 o'clock. And so they're probably easily in the triple digits. And so warm again that the papal audience had to be held inside St. Peter's Basilica to keep the people out of the extreme heat. Big month in August. There was an image I saw yesterday on one of the social media outlets because I follow all these Italy travel websites. People in line at Malpensa, that's the airport that services northern Italy through Milan, packed to the gills. People trying to get out of town for their Ferragosto vacation. Of course, August 15th coming up this weekend, the feast of course, the Assumption. And it's just a big, huge holiday, religious holiday, but also a vacation time in Italy. I'm sure Joan will talk about that as well. Coming up in the second hour of the program, we have the amazing Father Tab Holchek from the National Catholic Bioethics Center coming up. Now, there's a number of different stories that we were going to discuss with him, and we'll probably have time because we have 2 segments. But I need to get his reaction to this evil, disgusting legislation that was signed by a quote-unquote Catholic governor in Massachusetts. No limits on abortion. We had the story in the news yesterday. All the way through full term. And there's a little caveat in this law. I don't know if you knew this. Listen to this. This is supposed to be all about women's health. Well, guess what? Late-term abortion doesn't have to be done in a hospital, according to this bill. It's so evil. It's so vile. I had to put it aside and kind of lock it in my mind and put it away, especially when I saw the cheering and the clapping of all these women standing around the governor. How do you cheer for the murder of innocent babies? How do you do that? I had to put it aside, and I said, Lord, please help me deal with this. And so I want to talk to Father Tad, and I also want to talk about it in 2 cents, because brothers and sisters, when I came back to the church and I realized how I had been so duped by the very industry in which I was working, They sold me such a bill of goods, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And of course, it's not just the media, but they were just selling the lies of the left, and they continue to do that. They continue to lie about abortion. You know, she never said partial birth abortion. She never said anything about the actual procedure, this governor. Just talking about freedom for women, and women will be protected. Yeah, as long as you're outside the womb. So we'll talk about this in 2 cents, and then also with Father Ted Paholczyk coming up in hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. Okay, I have to get to the weather and calm down so I can get through the news this morning. Severe weather and heavy rainfall from the high plains to the Ohio Valley. Heat continuing in the central portions of the country. So the National Weather Service is saying there's a stationary front that will be the focus for showers and thunderstorms capable of widely scattered flash flooding and severe weather from the high plains to the Ohio Valley. Very heavy thunderstorms to the point of feeling like a monsoon could cause local flash flooding across the southwest and the Great Basin. And then we have dangerous heat continuing across the central plains and southeast. Many areas will see their hottest temperatures of the year. Well, we are in the month of August and we're still in summertime, even though some of the kids are already going back to school. Oh my goodness, it's already 6 minutes past the hour. We do need to get started on the news. It is a Wednesday morning. It is August 12th, 2026. Let's see what's happening here on EWTN. Pope Leo expressing his deep sorrow following that major earthquake that struck several parts of Colombia this week, offering prayers for the eternal rest of those who died and for the swift recovery of all those affected by the tragedy. Francesca Merlo with Vatican News reports his words coming in a telegram signed by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin and addressed to the Archbishop in that area of Cartagena, the president of the Colombian Bishops' Conference.
A magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck Colombia on Monday, the 10th of August, with its epicenter near San José del Palmar in the western department of Chocó. The powerful tremor was felt across much of Colombia and in neighboring Venezuela, Ecuador and Panama. More than 150 people have been killed and hundreds more injured, while others remain missing. The earthquake caused extensive damage to homes, hospitals, schools, roads, and parish churches. In Manizales, one of the towers of the city's iconic cathedral collapsed during the tremor. Rescue teams continue to search through the rubble of collapsed buildings, while emergency workers and volunteers provide assistance to people who have been displaced or lost their homes. In a telegram signed by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin, Pope Leo XIV said he was deeply saddened by the disaster. The Pope offered prayers for the eternal rest of those who died and for the swift recovery of the injured and all those affected by the tragedy. The message addressed to Archbishop Francisco Javier Munera Correra of Cartagena, president of the Colombian Bishops' Conference, also conveyed the Pope's heartfelt condolences to families mourning the loss of loved ones. Pope Leo thanked all those working with generous dedication in search and rescue operations and in providing relief, assuring them too of his spiritual closeness. Colombia's bishops have also expressed their solidarity with the victims, urging the country to recognize itself once again as one family. They stressed that no one can face an emergency of this magnitude alone, and they called for a response marked by generosity, responsibility, and solidarity.
Pope Leo has urged Catholics, meanwhile, to prioritize attending Sunday Mass, warning that active participation in the Eucharist cannot be replaced by virtual gatherings. He said, I urge everyone to seek the best possible conditions so that even those who are unable to take time off of work on Sundays may take part in Holy Mass. In his address during his general audience at the Vatican today, the Holy Father continuing his catechesis on the Second Vatican Council's Constitution on the Liturgy. He also explained the Church has always regarded Sunday as a weekly celebration of the Lord's resurrection or the Lord's Day, urging Catholics to attend Mass and warned against using virtual gatherings to try and substitute for in-person attendance. To sanctify Sunday, it is essential, he said, to celebrate the Eucharist. This assembly cannot be substituted by a solely virtual presence, nor can it be reduced to a merely passive gathering. The liturgical assembly is in fact fulfilled through the active participation of brothers and sisters in Christ, the Pope added. Tammy Trujillo tells us the Trump administration says Medicaid will no longer fund gender transition procedures for minors.
In a Truth Social post, President Trump wrote that, quote, "We're not going to pay for our innocent children to undergo these barbaric surgeries and practices, which result in unthinkable and irreversible harm to their young bodies." The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced the funding will be available for a tapering off period of up to 6 months for children currently on hormone therapy. The new rule is set to take effect on October 13th. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Former Marine Robert Gilman back on U.S. soil, this after being released from custody in Russia. Nick Harper explains Gilman had been held since 2022 when he was arrested for allegedly kicking a police officer while intoxicated.
Gilman is now receiving necessary medical treatment in the United States. The State Department also says that President Trump will not stop until all unjustly detained Americans are home, including one other detainee in Russia, Stephen Hubbard.
President Trump saying Russia did agree to release Gilman after his discussions with Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader reportedly cited humanitarian reasons for that release. Gilman landing just outside of Washington last night with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff writing on X, he had the profound privilege of welcoming a patriot. Mark Mayfield tells us at least 3 people died after a dangerous storm swept the Midwest yesterday.
2 of the deaths were in Indiana. A 4-year-old boy was killed when a tree fell on his home in Jennings County, and another person was killed in a house explosion believed to be storm-related. Another person died in Ohio. Also in Ohio, in Grafton, 16 people were struck by lightning at a prison and taken to local hospitals. Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther said the response teams were seeing disaster-like conditions. Meanwhile, the National Weather Service confirmed that 3 tornadoes touched down near Chicago on Tuesday. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A major upset being projected in the Wisconsin Democratic primary for state governor. Democratic socialist Francesca Hong favored to win the race, but multiple outlets are projecting she has been defeated, although narrowly, by moderate and so-called moderate Democrat David Crowley. Crowley will now face Republican Tom Tiffany in the November general election. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, Senator Amy Klobuchar has won the Democratic primary for governor. And Tom Tiffany is the winner of the Republican primary for Wisconsin governor. Tiffany, who has a general endorsement of President Trump, addressed supporters after declaring victory last night.
The fight is about Wisconsin. So I ask you tonight to stand with me. Stand with me for our fight for lower taxes and good-paying jobs.
And Republican Senator Darlene Graham facing Congressman Ralph Norman in South Carolina's Republican Senate primary. She spoke to her supporters after she advanced in that race.
Most importantly, I want to thank the Republican voters of South Carolina for having confidence in me. I look forward to the next 2 weeks, meeting with you, listening to your concerns, and telling you more about me and my conservative values.
And a massive wildfire is threatening hundreds of homes and businesses in California's Big Sur. Cal Fire says a timber fire has scorched nearly 3,000 acres since the weekend and is still just 5% contained. Evacuation orders are in place along the Big Sur coast south of Monterey, where firefighters are trying to keep the blaze from spreading to Highway 101 during the busy tourist season. In a Tuesday night update, officials say over 500 buildings were threatened by the fire, with more than 900 firefighters battling the blaze. It is a busy Wednesday morning, and we're excited to talk about a brand new seminary. We'll tell you all about it up next. How about some great news for a change? I know the world is just inundating us with bad news and tragedies and evils, but you know what? The church is still the church. We stay in the bark of Peter, and we continue to move forward and encourage vocations, which is exactly what Bishop Carl Kemme is doing. The Diocese of Wichita announcing very recently, August 6th, formally establishing St. Philip Neri Seminary, of course, named for the 16th century priest and co-founder of the Congregation of the Oratory, who helped revive both clergy and church during the Counter-Reformation. Your Excellency, thank you for joining us this morning, and congratulations. This must be so exciting for you.
Thank you, Teresa. Yes, and thank you for inviting me to be on your program. It is exciting for our diocese, and for me as the bishop of the diocese especially, so just happy to discuss it with you.
So why the reason for the new seminary? Obviously, we want to encourage vocations, but what was happening in your diocese where you thought this would be really, really needed?
Yes. Well, the Diocese of Wichita has been known for a number of things. One of them is this culture of vocations. So for many years prior to my arrival, and then throughout my time there, which has been 12 years, many young men have discerned and come forward to apply for seminary. We currently have 50 seminarians. We've had as many as 60, which for a diocese our size is rather extraordinary. So anyway, 9 years ago, we kind of launched into a formation program called the St. Joseph House of Formation, where we wanted to form our men going on to the priesthood, onto the major seminary. We wanted to form them in their college years in Wichita, to have our own priests participate in that, and so just have that at the heart of the diocese. So we started that program 9 years ago, and we started with 7 men, and it's grown into 40 men. And we decided that after 9 years, starting our 10th year, we would officially inaugurate it and establish it as a canonical seminary. And that's what we're choosing to do. And it's exciting. It's been met with great enthusiasm, but it's really been as a result of the fact that our program, we think, has been very, very successful.
So I know people are wondering, what's the secret in Wichita? Why do you get so many vocations, do you think, Your Excellency?
Yeah, everybody asks that. And there are many things, many dynamics at work there. I think principally we have many of our parishes have adoration. Not quite a number of them have perpetual adoration. We have a strong Eucharistic diocese, very, very beautiful masses, transcendent, sacred masses. We have a young presbyterate. I have ordained 52 men to the priesthood.
Wow.
In the 12 years that I've been there. So our presbyterate is predominantly young, and that encourages young people. It's just in our family, in the culture, in the diocese. I mean, obviously we have our own struggles like every other place, but there is a real honor fostered by our Catholic families to have their sons consider the seminary. And so we have many come and discern, and we have a very dynamic promotion program, and lots of things that other dioceses are doing now to encourage young men to consider this as their vocation. So it's just a lot of things involved in that. So
you also have amazing Catholic conferences that are true to church teaching. You bring in great speakers. I've been privileged to speak in the Diocese of Wichita many times, and it's such a beautiful, solidly Catholic area. We're speaking with Bishop Carl Kemme, who's talking about the newly established St. Philip Neri Seminary in his Diocese of Wichita. I think you mentioning the Eucharist, Your Excellency, is so important, and many parishes in your diocese having at least Eucharistic adoration, if not perpetual adoration. Do you think, and I'm hearing this from others around the country, with the emphasis that the bishops have given us on the Eucharist the last few years, obviously you have a lot of men that are joining the priesthood, or at least discerning for the priesthood prior to the Eucharistic Congress and prior to all the different events, but I would imagine with the emphasis on the Eucharist, we're going to see more interest in vocations, religious vocations. Would you agree with that?
I would. I talked to all the men that are applying. I interview them, I meet with them, and many of them have told me that they first heard the call in the silence of adoration. And that just is so beautiful to hear, that our Lord is speaking powerfully in adoration to the hearts of our young people, and that just reassures me that it's in those Eucharistic moments when we're adoring the Lord, when we're worshiping the Lord in the Mass, that the Lord is most powerfully communicating His desire, His love, His will for us. So, and then of course that the grace of that sacrament, the grace of the Eucharist, gives us the courage and the strength to respond generously to whatever the Lord is asking of us. So I firmly believe that it's borne itself out in witness after witness in our diocese.
You also mentioned something very interesting about the families in your diocese being very open to their sons and daughters considering a religious vocation, which isn't always the case, right?
Yeah, that's true. And even a few, but not very many, honestly, a few families, a few parents expressed concern or hesitancy, and maybe even opposition to their son or daughter entering a religious vocation. But my experience in Wichita is it's pretty much the opposite. Catholic life is very strong in our diocese. We have many great Catholic schools. Homeschooling is also a strong element in the diocesan life, and we have remarkably we have about 50% mass attendance, which according to the national average is really extraordinary. So all of those things really help provide then this culture of strong Catholic life, and as a result of that, positive experience of vocations.
So tell us about the connection with St. Philip Neri, the name of the seminary.
Yeah, so we first called our formation program the St. Joseph House of Formation, and it's located on the same campus as St. Joseph Parish in Wichita. We took over a former rectory, a former convent, and then another convent across the street to provide our housing and our campus for the seminary, so for the formation house. So we just said, let's call it the St. Joseph House of Formation. And obviously St. Joseph is a great patron for that, foster father of Jesus and husband of Mary, protector of the church. When we were discerning inaugurating it as a seminary, we thought, well, maybe a name change. So we started looking at that. I asked all of our priests and I asked all of our seminarians to offer suggestions. And there were many, many great suggestions. But St. Philip Neri came up numerous times. And honestly, that his name, his intercession resonated with me and with our director, who will now be our rector of the seminary, Father Chad Arnold. We were on a pilgrimage together with our deacons to Ars last April, right before their ordination. And we were praying into that at that holy place. And St. Philip Neri really, really resonated with us. So yes, he's a great saint of the 16th century, a great priest, apostle of Rome. And what I love about his life is that he was so authentically human, full of joy, full of laughter. He drew people to Christ through his friendship. And it seems to me, in my humble opinion, this is what priests need to do in today's church, to be authentically human, to combine their humanity with holiness, and particularly with joy and humility. These are the virtues that I think will most make our priests fruitful in their ministry. And so we're just really, really praying that his intercession will be powerful for our seminarians and for our priests, especially our priests that come out of our new seminary, St. Philip Neri.
Well, God bless you, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us this morning. I can only imagine how busy you are as a bishop. Bishop Carl A. Kemi talking about the beautiful establishment of St. Philip Neri Seminary, of course, named for the 16th century Italian priest and founder of the Congregation of the Oratory. We'll be right back. Minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Every Wednesday, we do a segment called Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, based on my 2 Italy books published by EWTN. Volume 1 came out last June, Italy Shrines and Wonders, discovering sacred spaces and fascinating places all across Italy. And Volume 2, Italy Shrines and Wonders, which just came out this June, about a month ago, discovering sacred spaces and fascinating places in the life of St. Francis of Assisi. And also, of course, as you might suspect, very much in the book is St. Clare of Assisi, who had a very, very strong friendship with Francis of Assisi. There's a beautiful article at EWTNnews.com that was posted yesterday on her feast day, which is one of the reasons why we're obviously talking about her this morning. 7 things to know about St. Clare of Assisi, the patron saint of television. So briefly, if you are going to the land of St. Clare and St. Francis, obviously if you're going to Assisi, you would go to the beautiful Basilica where her crypt is located, which is a phenomenal church where you will also find the San Damiano cross, the original cross that spoke to St. Francis. Her crypt is there, also a very large collection of relics of both Francis and Clare. And then you would also want to visit just above St. Clare, the beautiful Cathedral of Rufino. In that general area, that's where she first heard Francis speak when she was a teenager, and the baptismal font where both Francis and Clare were baptized is inside San Rufino. You may also go to St. Mary of the Angels down in Santa Maria del Angeli, the city named after that beautiful basilica below the city of Assisi, for the Portiuncula, Little Portion Church, which was very important in the life of both saints, and it's where Francis conferred the habit on to Clare. So those are just a few places that you should visit in terms of if you're going to Assisi and want to learn more about St. Clare, all detailed in my book and all detailed in my series, The Unknown St. Francis, which you can find for free at EWTN.com, St. Francis/St. Francis. But what's so beautiful about these two saints, both St. Clare, who's the patron of television, and St. Francis, is that after Clare heard him and started to work with him in his ministry, and he helped her, obviously, she was the one who founded, with the help of St. Francis, the Poor Clares, and very much connected and directed the life of our own founder's mother, Angelica, of course. But they had a very beautiful and deep friendship, and so did several other saints. So we did one segment in the series, which we're going to share the audio with you right now, which is focusing on holy friendships, including, of course, because it's a series on St. Francis, the friendship between St. Clare and St. Francis. Let's take a listen. How many of you know about the special friendship that existed between St. Clare of Assisi and St. Francis of Assisi? Obviously, we are standing just below this magnificent medieval town where both of the saints were born and raised. It's a very special place, a beautiful place dedicated to their lives and ministry. And we also have a new saint that's buried here as well, of course, St. Carlo Acutis, who loved St. Francis and also considered him a friend. But if you look back in the history of the Catholic Church, there are so many wonderful saints who were friends and very good friends. For example, going back to the early part of Christendom, St. Paul and St. Barnabas. Or how about St. John of the Cross and my patron, St. Teresa of Avila? And think about St. Francis Xavier and St. Ignatius of Loyola and the impact they had, right, on the Jesuits and the growth of that order. And here we are again in central Italy talking about the holy friendship between St. Clare and St. Francis. Now, St. Clare also came, much like St. Francis, from a very well-to-do family, a very wealthy family in Assisi. They wanted her to get married and raise a family, and they were stunned when she decided to join up with St. Francis and his mission. She actually heard him preach in 1210 when she was still a teenager, and she was just captivated by his words, and she just loved the fact that he was helping her get closer to Christ through his message of simplicity and getting back to the basics of the faith, the love of the Eucharist, the caring for the poor, doing what you can for other people, putting yourself last. It just hit her heart so hard that she decided to give everything up, again, walk away from her wealth, even sell her dowry and give that money to the poor, and then joining Francis in his mission. So she goes down to St. Mary of the Angels, which is that area that we've been in for a few times in this series, that beautiful church. It wasn't there. It was built, of course, many centuries later. But inside that church, as we've explained to you, is the Portiuncula, Little Portion Church, which was in existence when St. Clare decided to join up with St. Francis. And what did he do at that time? Well, she actually changed her very elegant dress, her fancy clothes, for a simple habit, and he conferred the habit on her after cutting her hair. Imagine what her family thought. They tried to dissuade her and even try to force her to go back to her wealthy lifestyle, but she refused, and eventually, with the help of St. Francis, started the order of the Poor Clares. Now, here we are 800 years later, and I'm standing outside the beautiful town of Assisi, and we think about the impact that that holy friendship had on not only their lives, the lives of the people of that day, but so many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world. The Poor Clares now number well over 20,000. The secular Franciscans, 430,000 plus. The Franciscan friars, the Friars Minor, well over at least 12,000 or more, and it keeps growing. The numbers keep changing because the message, the simplicity of the Franciscans keeps grabbing people's hearts. And so never diminish a holy friendship. Never think that your relationship with someone, if you're doing the work of God and working together with a friend or a family member, that you can't have a long-term impact, not only on your close circle of family and friends, but maybe your parish, maybe your community, maybe your Bible study. Holy friendships, they do matter. Maybe something you didn't know in this series we're doing on the unknown St. Francis about the very special holy friendship between these two great saints, St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare of Assisi. Some questions for reflection. What qualities are needed for a holy friendship? What rule of life or practice do you follow in daily life? And how does your life point others to Christ? So there you go, an examination of the friendship, the very holy friendship between St. Clare of Assisi, whose feast day was yesterday, and the great St. Francis of Assisi, whose feast day we celebrate coming up on October 4th. Also this year is in the Holy Year of St. Francis, marking 800 years since his passing. EWTN.com has a number of great articles, of course, on both saints, and one in particular written by Father Joseph, where he talks about the miracle, why she was named the patron of television, because she was able to actually experience the Mass in her room as if she were there in church. So kind of like the first, I would say, live Mass for the shut-ins was in the cell of St. Clare on a Christmas Eve when she couldn't get to Mass. She was praying because she so wanted to be there. Now, it's interesting. In 1958, when Pope Pius XII named St. Clare the patroness of TV, he wrote, "The Church, which has never been against the progress of civilization, encourages inventions and discoveries, and even uses them for the propagation of the truth and the extension of religion. Among such useful inventions, the television has its place. It reproduces the sights and sounds of distant events in so vivid a manner," and think about that, it's 1958 when he made this statement, "so vivid a manner that one would think to be actually present at them. Television," he also said, "can be the source of great good, but at the same time great evil. In view of the singular power it exercises over the very soul of the family, it behooves us," he said, "therefore, to give this invention a heavenly safeguard, who prevents it from evil and allows its good." That's why he appointed for the patronage St. Clare. St. Clare of Assisi, pray for us, all of us here at EWTN involved in broadcast ministry, and for every one of us who engages with the media. A great saint indeed. St. Clare of Assisi, pray for us. We'll be right back. Staying in Bella Italia, going from the region of Umbria for St. Clare of Assisi, who was our saint of the day yesterday, down south, about 2 hours or so, to Roma, the Eternal City, where we find our very own Joni, Joan's Rome, at WordPress.com. A great blog. Got to check it out. I'm sure you do. You listen to her every week here. So, Joni, I guess the audience, I was looking at the pictures, once again inside St. Peter's because of the extreme heat. How's the weather there? Very, very hot indeed, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's triple digit. I have to tell you, I did not go out yesterday, and I haven't gone out today. It's that kind of weather. And you don't have to be my age. You can be half my age. It's that kind of thing. You won't find anybody on the sidewalks. You don't find anybody eating at the table outside at a restaurant. And so just given the triple digits that we had today, and it's supposed to be like from now through Sunday, Saturday, the Feast of the Assumption, Sunday, it's just supposed to be unbearable. Of course, it would be downright cruel to have a general audience in St. Peter's Square. You'd need an entire staff of doctors and nurses to help everybody. I mean, inside the Basilica today, there had been hundreds of fans. That was the thing that was moving the most in the Basilica today. Handheld fans, men, women, and children. So, it still was. When you put thousands of bodies together in any building, even if it's a generally cooler basilica, thousands of bodies make a difference. So, but they have to do it. I mean, in the summer, this time in the summer, there would be a lot of visitors at a general audience, but not as many Italians. And you could tell the number of visitors today, because when the Pope would have greetings in different languages, the 8 or 9 languages of the general audience. You know, if it was Arabic, Spanish, English, obviously English always gets the biggest applause, but groups from all over the world. So a lot of tourists today, I had the impression it was more visitors than it was, necessarily Italians. Obviously his audience the theme was on the liturgy, and which he called, the liturgical year is the foundation and nucleus of everything that we believe the Eucharist is. So, and the Pope asked people, as you and I were kind of saying, before we went on air, the Pope urged people to participate actively, that's the word, in Eucharistic celebration as a visible expression of communion with Christ and his church. And that's one of the things that really changed with Vatican Council II, because the faithful were urged to be key components of a Eucharistic celebration, of a Mass, to participate actively in prayers, not just through kneeling or standing, so physical signs of participation, but through songs, through responses at Mass, even those that might still be in Latin, such as Kyrie. Well, that's not Latin. That's Kyrie eleison. So he definitely encouraged participation and said, he just urged people. He said, I urge everyone to seek the best possible conditions so that even those who are unable to take time off of work on Sundays may take part in Holy Mass. And, of course, one of the things the Vatican Council II changed is the fact that there's probably some of our listeners who know this and others who weren't around to know that once upon a time we did not have Mass in the evenings, so that we didn't have a vigil Mass. And I think that's what helps a lot of us through a weekend. If it comes up on a Sunday, it could be travel or something else, and your obligation to go to Mass, because it is an obligation. Your obligation means that you can now, ever since Vatican Council II, go to Mass on a Saturday night, and that meets your Sunday obligation. In fact, years ago, I remember one thing. I got to know Jack and Linda Del Rio, and especially when he, at that time, he's an NFL coach, and at that time he was coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when I spent a week in Jacksonville at Thanksgiving and went to a game and everything, it was fascinating how much faith was a part of Linda, and especially Jack's life. At the time, 16 of the 18 assistant coaches for the Jaguars were Catholic. But before if it was a home game, the entire team stayed in a hotel Saturday night before the game. And then Sunday morning, he always arranged to have Mass in a room. Anybody could come to Mass. Obviously, it was for those who were Catholic. And if any of the players wanted to go, then he made that possible for those who were Catholic and had an obligation. He always had a priest. And when it was an out-of-town game, if the team was going to be in a town where he didn't know any priest, he then brought a priest from Jacksonville, so that whenever they could arrange it, Saturday night or Sunday morning in a hotel, there would always be Mass for Catholics. So I remember how impressed I was about how important his faith was. In fact, if you went into his office, at the Jaguars office at the time, you might not have known, except for the exercise bike in front of the screen where he looked at a previous game, you might not know it was an NFL office by all the very Catholic things. So, a cross, and I brought them a beautiful icon from Rome. So the importance of Mass on Sunday, that's one thing which I think Vatican Council II certainly made the right move in the direction of establishing vigils, but we do have to go. Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful because unfortunately many people are still thinking it's okay. Even though COVID was so many years ago, obviously Mass online is still offered at many parishes for people who can't get there. Physically cannot get there. But it doesn't substitute. If you are able to go, you need to be there physically. That never has changed. It is still the case. But some people are thinking, well, I was able to do that during COVID, so I'm fine now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can think of many, many times in my life when I've gone to Mass when I shouldn't have. I mean, literally, not if I had something contagious like a very bad cough and the flu, but I mean, obviously you don't want to make other people sick, and that would be a wrong thing. But I just saw, from childhood, that's my upbringing.
Right.
Mass was, you went to Mass. There was no excuse for not going to Mass, unless, of course, you were having your appendix taken out or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had to have a good reason. So,
yeah,
and it's interesting. This is the liturgy, and Sunday being the annual liturgy for the whole church. And he said the liturgical year, I guess is what I want to say. And that is liturgical year is Christmas, it's Easter, it's every single Sunday. And every single Sunday, as the Pope told us today, is the resurrection again. Mm-hmm. And this is not a mere symbol, something you got to look back and remember, but this is not just a static representation of past events, but an encounter with Christ himself. So very beautiful words on the liturgy, and he repeated all of those. Pope Leo did in the language greetings, which he gives after the summaries of his main catechesis are presented in 9 languages. Then the Pope always says greetings for people of that language, and Spanish and English are the languages in which he also reads the summary and greets the people, being his best 2 languages, but he could do it in Italian and in a few other languages because he's studying German too. So, by the way, just before we went on air, so to speak, I was checking out the Vatican News website, and on the Italian site, Teresa?
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead. I'm listening. You're
okay.
There.
No, I just heard a ping, and I know that last week we lost the line.
We're good.
Yeah. Anyway, that Pope Leo has sent a first sign of aid to the Colombian bishops. He sent 100,000 euro to the National Secretariat for Social and Charitable Ministries, and he's asked that this be sent to the most hard-hit dioceses, those struck by the recent earthquake, and there have been some terrible, tragic pictures online, and people digging for loved ones, hearing people scream from under rubble of a building. Those are the people that the Pope always thanks, first responders and everything, as he should, because I know there's people out there doing what I couldn't do.
Right.
Although in emergencies, I guess you don't think, you just act. So in any event, he has, spent that money. I'm sure it will go to whatever the needs of the people, of the families in those areas struck by the earthquakes. So, interesting news from that. That'll probably come out. Most of the time, the Italian site of Vatican News will have some news stories before everybody else, because the news story will arrive first in Italian, and then the rest of the languages the people have to translate it. So it'll probably be up soon on the Vatican website news
it's so tragic. I know that there was a letter that was sent to the Bishop Cartagena, and you think about the earthquake in Colombia and then being felt in other parts of that part of the world, including Venezuela, where they had the other major earthquake. It's just such a tragic thing, and the lives lost. And also, I just think it's really important for us to just think about what it means to get a message from the Pope. Sometimes we may dismiss that or think, it's just what the Pope has to do, but it's a huge, huge outreach.
Well, and you're absolutely right, because people will go, oh, my gosh, he's a man of such great responsibilities, responsible for the church all around the world, 200 countries, etc., that he would have time to think of us. But that's also why the Pope has so many advisors around him, and that's why you have all the language desks that you have in the Secretariat of State, so that the whatever happens in a Spanish-speaking community, the language desk will get to the Holy Father, or French, or Chinese, if it's a message that the Holy Father, should be sending, and condolences or help, or I'm praying for the victims of an accident. So you've got a lot of people out there paying attention to delicate situations in the world, situations that the Holy Father would want to know about, and would just want to express his closeness to people, no matter what the circumstances might be. So lots of people at work every day, and, this is part of the behind the scenes. I'll be talking about this in a speech I'll be giving to Legatus in September.
Oh, good.
But there's so much. Well, it's called Untold Stories from a Vatican Insider. And
wonderful.
It's Teresa, it's all the behind the things that you and I know about that go on.
Right.
That don't make Vatican news or anybody else's news every single day. Issues are being studied. When I see people say ridiculous things on Facebook, why doesn't the Pope this or that, excommunicate? So I just sit there, and I want to say something on their website. I don't always have the time, but they don't know what's going on.
Exactly. And that's why I'm glad you're speaking out there, not only on the radio and on your blog, but also in America. And you can find Joan, of course, and reach out to her through her beautiful blog, JonesRome at WordPress.com. Out of time, Joni, yet again, and we will talk to you next week. We'll be right back. Appreciate your listenership at EWTN's Catholic Connection every day, Monday through Friday. And coming up in hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra, we are going to be joined by the wonderful Father Tad Pacholczyk, of course, from the National Catholic Bioethics Center, and his terrific and very informative website, fathertad.com. And we're going to be talking about a number of stories impacting life. And there's a number of issues going on with euthanasia, horrific things happening there. But I want to get his take on what happened this week in Massachusetts. The bishops there have spoken out about it, but this governor, who still identifies, she calls herself a Catholic, and signing this law with absolutely no limits on abortion. So all the way through 9 months of pregnancy. And oh, by the way, I wonder if the media are telling you about this. You don't have to get that procedure, that gruesome murdering procedure, done in a hospital. But it's all about women's health. And it's all about reproductive safety. But what really got me so upset and just was like a knife in my heart, and I'm sure it was for many of you, were all the people, mainly women, some of whom were also politicians, standing behind the governor as she was signing this legislation, cheering, clapping. Dear Sacred Heart of Jesus, how can you do that? How? We'll discuss with Father Tad. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
It is a Wednesday morning, and it's hour number 2 of Catholic Connection here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are talking, as always, about the things that matter most and looking at everything through the lens of Scripture and the teachings of the Catholic faith, especially some big stories regarding issues of life. The one, the only Father Tad Pacholczyk, an amazing Catholic bioethicist and speaker and doctor and great priest and teacher of all things Catholic, is joining us. We are going to get his expert advice and his opinion regarding some recent developments with euthanasia and some of the most demonic and diabolical things going on, for example, with abortion. Now, abortion, of course, we know is diabolical, period. Every single abortion is intrinsically evil. Okay? Abortion is never okay. And yet we have in the state of Massachusetts, we have the governor there who still identifies as a Catholic, Maura Healey, signing some of the most extreme abortion legislation in the country. She becomes the 11th governor to do such. So 11 states, and there's a complete story on EWTNnews.com. 11 states, no restrictions on abortion, all the way through 9 months. And what really concerns me, obviously, in addition to this barbaric law, is the fact that so many in the media don't investigate, don't really see what's going on. They buy the lies of the left that say, oh, these late-term abortions are very rare and only when it's necessary for the so-called health of the mother. They also don't tell you what abortion really is and how the procedures are done. Now, Marjorie Dannenfelser with the Susan B. Anthony List Pro-Life America did put out a very clear and detailed statement. As awful it is to hear, we need to hear it because that's the reality of the situation. The media, who, in terms of research, are all, most of them, a vast majority of them support legalized abortion with no limitations. The surveys show that, and I talk about that in my book, Noise. And I talk about it in my book, Extreme Makeover, as well. So they're just buying it hook, line, and sinker, and they don't want to really rock the boat at all because they know that abortion is a god to the left. They worship at the altar of abortion. So they won't take it upon themselves to do due diligence in their jobs as so-called journalists to look at this issue. Do they even know that these procedures, these gruesome, barbaric procedures of killing the child in the womb up to 9 months, don't need to be performed in a hospital? Have they looked at the safety regulations? It's like a free-for-all. It's like the wild, wild west. But that's okay because it's all about women's health. You need to do some due diligence. We all need to do it to make sure we know when we're voting for someone. And don't buy the arguments of the left and the media who tell you this is all about women's health. It's a lie. We'll discuss in 2 cents and with Father Ted Paholczyk. All right, weather-wise, severe weather and heavy rainfall from the high plains to the Ohio Valley. Heat continuing in the central parts of the country and the southeast as well. We have a stationary front that will be the focus for daily showers and thunderstorms capable of widely scattered flash flooding and severe weather from the high plains to the Ohio Valley. And we have monsoonal-type thunderstorms that could cause local flash flooding across the southwest and the Great Basin. Dangerous heat continues across the Central Plains and the southeast, and many areas will see their hottest temperatures of the year right now. 4 minutes past the hour on this Wednesday morning. Thank you so much for tuning in on this feast of St. Francis de Chantal. Let's get to the news on a Wednesday. Well, our Holy Father, as Joan mentioned earlier in the first hour, expressing his deep sorrow following that major earthquake that struck several parts of Colombia, offering prayers for the eternal rest of those who died and for the swift recovery of all those affected by the tragedy. Francesco Merlo with Vatican News reports the words came in a very special telegram signed by the Secretary of State of the Vatican, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, addressed to the head of the Colombian Bishops' Conference.
Magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck Colombia on Monday, the 10th of August, with its epicenter near San José del Palmar in the western department of Chocó. The powerful tremor was felt across much of Colombia and in neighboring Venezuela, Ecuador and Panama. More than 150 people have been killed and hundreds more injured, while others remain missing. The earthquake caused extensive damage to homes, hospitals, schools, roads, and parish churches. In Manizales, one of the towers of the city's iconic cathedral collapsed during the tremor. Rescue teams continue to search through the rubble of collapsed buildings, while emergency workers and volunteers provide assistance to people who have been displaced or lost their homes. In a telegram signed by Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin, Pope Leo XIV said he was deeply saddened by the disaster. The Pope offered prayers for the eternal rest of those who died and for the swift recovery of the injured and all those affected by the tragedy. The message addressed to Archbishop Francisco Javier Munera Correra of Cartagena, president of the Colombian Bishops' Conference, also conveyed the Pope's heartfelt condolences to families mourning the loss of loved ones. Pope Leo thanked all those working with generous dedication in search and rescue operations and in providing relief, assuring them too of his spiritual closeness. Colombia's bishops have also expressed their solidarity with the victims, urging the country to recognize itself once again as one family. They stressed that no one can face an emergency of this magnitude alone, and they called for a response marked by generosity, responsibility, and solidarity.
The Holy Father also urging Catholics at the audience today to prioritize attending Sunday Mass, warning that active participation in the Eucharist cannot be replaced by virtual gatherings. He said, I urge everyone to seek the best possible conditions so that even those who are unable to take time off of work on Sundays may take part in Holy Mass. In the address during the general audience at the Vatican today, the Holy Father continued his catechesis on the Second Vatican Council's Constitution on the Liturgy. He also explained the Church has always regarded Sunday as a weekly celebration of the resurrection of our Lord, urging Catholics to attend Sunday Mass and warning against using virtual gatherings to substitute for in-person attendance. To sanctify Sunday, he said, it is essential to celebrate the Eucharist. This assembly cannot be substituted by a solely virtual presence, nor can it be reduced to a merely passive gathering. Liturgical assembly, he said, is in fact fulfilled through the active participation of brothers and sisters. Tammy Trujillo tells us the Trump administration is saying Medicaid will no longer fund so-called gender transitioning procedures for minors.
In a Truth Social post, President Trump wrote that, quote, we're not going to pay for our innocent children to undergo these barbaric surgeries and practices, which result in unthinkable and irreversible harm to their young bodies. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced the funding will be available for a tapering off period of up to 6 months for children currently on hormone therapy. The new rule is set to take effect on October 13th. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Former Marine Robert Gilman back on U.S. soil, this after being released from custody in Russia. Reporter Nick Harper explains Gilman had been held since back in 2022 when he was arrested for allegedly kicking a police officer while intoxicated.
Gilman is now receiving necessary medical treatment in the United States. The State Department also says that President Trump will not stop until all unjustly detained Americans are home, including one other detainee in Russia, Stephen Hubbard.
President Trump says Russia agreed to release Gilman after his discussions with President Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader reportedly cited humanitarian reasons for that release. Gilman landed just outside of Washington last night, with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff writing on X that he had the profound privilege actually, of welcoming home a patriot. And Mark Mayfield tells us at least 3 people are dead after dangerous storms swept the Midwest yesterday.
2 of the deaths were in Indiana. A 4-year-old boy was killed when a tree fell on his home in Jennings County, and another person was killed in a house explosion believed to be storm-related. Another person died in Ohio. Also in Ohio, in Grafton, 16 people were struck by lightning at a prison and taken to local hospitals. Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther said the response teams were seeing disaster-like conditions. Meanwhile, the National Weather Service confirmed 3 tornadoes touched down near Chicago on Tuesday. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A big upset being projected in the Wisconsin Democratic primary for state governor. Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong was favored big time to win yesterday's race, but multiple outlets say she lost, and she was nearly defeated by a moderate, or someone who calls himself a moderate, Democrat David Crowley. Crowley will now face Republican Tom Tiffany in the November general election. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, Senator Amy Klobuchar has won the Democratic primary for governor. Tom Tiffany is the winner of the Republican primary for Wisconsin Governor. Tiffany, who has the endorsement of President Trump, addressing supporters after declaring victory.
The fight is about Wisconsin. So I ask you tonight to stand with me. Stand with me for our fight for lower taxes and good-paying jobs.
Tiffany was a heavy favorite heading into the primary and led the vote tally in every county around the Badger State. And again, he will face Democrat David Crowley in November after Crowley narrowly defeated Democratic Socialist Francesca Hahn, who had been favored to win. And Republican Senator Darlene Graham facing Congressman Ralph Norman in South Carolina's Republican Senate primary runoff. She spoke to her supporters after she advanced last night.
Most importantly, I want to thank the Republican voters of South Carolina for having confidence in me. I look forward to the next 2 weeks, meeting with you, listening to your concerns, and telling you more about me and my conservative values.
Neither candidate succeeding in getting the necessary 50% plus one vote to avoid a runoff. The Republican runoff election is set for August 25th now. The special Senate primary came after Senator Lindsey Graham's sudden death. The governor appointed his sister Darlene to serve out the remainder of his term, and she's running now for his full term. And a massive wildfire is threatening hundreds of homes and businesses in California's Big Sur. Cal Fire says a timber fire has scorched nearly 3,000 acres since the weekend and is still just 5% contained. Evacuation orders are in place along the Big Sur coast south of Monterey. This where firefighters are now trying to keep the blaze from spreading to Highway 101 during the busy tourist season. In a Tuesday night update, officials said over 500 buildings were threatened by the fire, with more than 900 firefighters battling that blaze. And a top executive coach is saying American workers need to address their fears that AI will replace them. Neil Shore says employees need to look beyond the fears and look at how they can up their own participation at work to stand out from the crowd.
That is a differentiator. And for as simple as it sounds, most people duck and hide, and I teach people to raise their hand. A
recent Reuters poll revealing 53% of Americans fear artificial intelligence could cost them their job, and Neil believes those fears could lead to workers starting to swirl. Shore says the swirls happen when you ruminate about your fears and make the situation worse than it actually is. He also says workers will always bring uniquely human contributions to the table and advises focusing on higher productivity and looking for ways to expand your current job duties. His new book, The 25th Hour, is out now. He says it's an in-depth look at how to prevent our emotional reactions to situations from eating away at our time at work and our energy at work. And Wendy Swanson tells us more than 2,000 video gamers have been hired now as air traffic controllers by the FAA.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy made the announcement in a social media post over the weekend. The hirings were made after the agency launched a campaign in April looking for the next generation of air traffic controllers that had qualities like problem-solving skills and multitasking abilities. The FAA said the hiring effort was focused on reaching talented young people pursuing alternative career paths. It added that several controllers pointed to gaming as an influence on their ability to think quickly, stay focused, and manage complexity. I'm Wendy Swanson.
And we'll be right back.
This is Life Issues with Victor Nieves, president of Life Issues Institute.
A tragic story from India reminds us of the fact that abortion doesn't just end the life of an unborn child, which is tragic enough, but it can also claim the life of the mother. A 35-year-old woman reportedly died after undergoing a sex-selective abortion following a prenatal test that revealed she was carrying a baby girl. The family feared that another baby girl would make their financial situation worse. According to reports, she suffered severe complications and later died despite receiving medical treatment. Authorities are investigating and have already made several arrests. Every abortion ends an innocent human life, but too often the abortion industry and its supporters ignore the risks that mothers face as well. Nothing about abortion is safe, not for mother or child.
Join our Life Defenders team today. Text the words Life Defender to 41444.
So we're going to talk more about this barbaric law that was signed by the governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. It really is unbelievable. I guess I shouldn't say it's unbelievable given what our world is today, but when you see her signing this measure, and then you see mostly women behind her, and this happened, by the way, 2 days ago, August 10th, And they're all cheering and clapping. And yay, isn't it great? We get to kill our babies in the womb now through 9 months of pregnancy. All right, so here's a press release from the wonderful group Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey signed a bill allowing abortion at any point in pregnancy. The bill allows elective abortion through all 9 months for any reason based on the professional judgment of an abortionist with a medical degree. As if an abortionist is ever going to say no to an abortion. That's how they make their living. The United States now has a dozen states that allow, the Susan B. Anthony list says, elective abortions up until birth. Second and third trimester abortions, and this is hard to hear, folks, but this is the truth, are generally done by dismemberment of the baby or labor. Inducing labor may result in a live birth. If the abortionist has not first delivered a lethal injection into the baby's heart, which many admit they do not, according to the Charlotte Lozier Institute, over 60,000 abortions occur after 15 weeks each year, a point by which science shows the baby feels pain. SBA Pro-Life America President Marjorie Dannenfelser mourning the news of the governor's signature on this extreme bill. It should shock the conscience that tens of thousands of unborn Americans are barbarically dismembered limb by limb and torn apart every single year. Sadly, she says that number will only increase with Governor Healey's approval of the abortion up until birth bill. The GOP must abandon the leave it to the states position, a stance that permits egregious late-term abortions laws like this one, and advance national protections for unborn children. Without a minimum national standard, the U.S. remains only, listen to this, one of only 8 countries worldwide that allows abortion at any point in pregnancy. And as Marjorie Dannenfelser says, we must do all we can to turn the page on America's ugly chapter of late-term abortion. And again, the U.S. is one of 8 countries in the world, along with China, that allows abortion at any point, according to a 2024 study from the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Another study completed in 2024 shows 46 of 50 countries in Europe limit abortion after 15 weeks. Well, isn't that just great? The United States of America, one of only 8 countries, along with China. Oh, yes, we want to be in that group with China. Isn't that encouraging? But the thing that really got me was the cheering. I was going to play it, but then I thought, no, I don't want to give that any more coverage than necessary. It was so upsetting to me. I reported the story after it happened on Tuesday in the news yesterday. It was my lead story, but then I had to kind of block it out because I was so upset. I mean, anything about abortion should upset us all, should cause us not to sleep at night. But to stand there and cheer, yay, we can kill our babies up to 9 months, yay! Talk about right out of the pit of hell. And how many really know the details of this bill, which I just outlined for you in this statement from the Susan B. Anthony list, Pro-Life America? I want you to hear this again. Now, you can share this. And if you go to sbaprolife.org, go to their news section, there is an updated statement from the organization. And you can share it or post it and let people know. How many people realize, because this is not coming out in the secular media, they're just making it seem like a simple procedure that rarely happens, and this is wonderful because women will have choice for a longer period of time. Really? What about the choice of the baby? What about the choice of the father? And how is this good reproductive health? As you just heard in that ad that we played, that promo that we played from the Charlotte Lozier Institute, abortion is not good for the baby or the mother, period. Inducing labor, which is how they do this gruesome procedure, may result in a live birth if the abortionist has not first delivered a lethal injection into the baby's heart, which many admit they do not. And again, This is a fact that must be understood. According to the Charlotte Lozier Institute, over 60,000 abortions occur after 15 weeks each year, a point by which science shows the baby feels pain. Now, any abortion is intrinsically evil. But if you talk about this story with someone who calls themselves pro-choice, they will say, oh, it's so rare. Not that that should matter, but it's not rare. The media and the left have done a number on us for decades, and it continues with the BS that's out there about this law. Okay? It is not about health. It is about politics. It is about agenda. It is about this governor playing to the left because she's scared if she doesn't sign this. She should be scared for much more. She calls herself a Catholic. Dear Sacred Heart of Jesus, 9 months. How barbaric. And again, the time shouldn't matter. Every abortion, I don't care if it's, 2 months, it's awful. But the detail in terms of the dismemberment of the baby. And I know there's many people listening. People say, oh, you're preaching to the choir on Catholic radio. Well, you know what? All of us need practice, just like the choir. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And I hear from many people who claim to be Catholic and see nothing wrong with being pro-choice. The teaching has not changed. And this is what is also a problem here, where this governor has no problem signing this measure and she still calls herself a Catholic. You have to pray for her. You have to pray for her. This decision is putting her in harm's way spiritually. I can remember many years ago when one of our governors who sold out also called herself a Catholic, Jennifer Granholm, and she went the pro-choice way. And a lot of Catholics are complaining. Pro-life Catholics were very concerned, and with good reason. They didn't think the church was doing anything about it to talk to her. Come to find out that the then Archbishop, Cardinal Maida, spoke with her, reached out to her, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and said, first of all, about the Catholic teaching, how it was wrong, how you're leading people astray. And he said, but you're also putting your own soul in jeopardy. He said, I'm going to give you one more chance to change this, but then I'm just going to have to turn you over to God because this is evil. And so we have to pray for her, yes. But we have to make sure that we are educated on this issue and that we are not falling prey, which I did for years. I'm not claiming to be innocent on this. In my reversion and coming back to the church, I had to humble myself and say, God, I am so sorry by being sucked in by my own industry. We all have to be well enough informed to be able to lovingly, but truthfully, explain the truth to people who are lost, such as this governor. More on this from Father Ted Baholchek. Lord, help us. Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It is a Wednesday morning. I'm so glad Father Tad is on with us. Maybe he can calm me down because he's so calm, so knowledgeable. All right, so we are also going to talk about another lovely story. Isn't this terrific? This came out late last month, death by organ donation. Doctors raising the possibility of retrieving organs from MAID patients. Of course, MAID refers to a law that was passed while they are still alive. I don't even know where to begin, Father, but first I do want to go back to Massachusetts, where the governor, who apparently still calls herself a Catholic, signed this gruesome measure, and now we have 12 states in the United States of America allow for abortion without any restrictions, Father, through 9 months of pregnancy. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, good to join you, Teresa. Yeah, this is hard to fathom that we've moved in such a radical way. And as you pointed out during the break, behind the governor as she was announcing this was a group of people cheering. And, you can definitely find contingents like that in Massachusetts. That's where I happen to be currently.
Right.
And,
this is your area.
It's home base for me. And it's just very difficult I think it does remind us of the need here to be able to begin begin some hard conversations again. I think a lot of people in the pro-life movement were like, well, Roe v. Wade was overturned. We're good. We don't have to kind of get too much into the nitty-gritty. We don't have to go into the weeds anymore. Well, I'm afraid, Roe v. Wade was on the books, 50 years, and we're talking 50 million deaths. That's a huge number,
At
and
least,
a lot of people got used to it, We just became accustomed. So once people are in that mind frame, it's like, I don't see anything wrong with this. So there's an urgent need for some basic evangelization, for clarification, for discussion, and frankly, also at times for real debates. So I think that's part of the challenge, is to make sure that our legislative process does allow for both sides to get in there and speak. I remember in the old days when I was giving testimony on embryonic stem cell research and cloning, I felt like there was something of an attempt to be even-handed. They had me come in as a priest. I was speaking on this up in Boston. And there were TV cameras. It was like, okay, so we're sort of at least vetting it both ways and people can get a sense of what's going on. But now you worry that it's more behind closed doors. It's just the lawmakers talking to themselves, and a few advocates who happen to be of the same outlook. And I think we need to be watching closely what's really going on in these efforts to pass legislative initiatives like this. And a lot of Catholics are just not connected in that way.
Well, too many of us, and this was me for years, thanks be to God, the Lord knocked me off my high horse, and I actually had to do some research and find out, where this issue was going with abortion. It was because of my job, not because I was, all of a sudden, having a come to Jesus moment, although I eventually did, thanks be to God. But when I had to research it for an interview, I started to realize and this was back in the late 80s, when there was a measure in Michigan where they were trying to outlaw welfare-funded abortion. So I had to find out about legalized abortion in Michigan, about welfare-funded abortions, and bring both sides of the story in for an interview. And that's when I really started to see from my own eyes the many hypocrisies, the lies that the abortion left had been giving us for years. And so many of us, Father, just go along to get along and don't stop and think about what is going on. And just the image of these women, mostly women who were in the governor's office on Monday as she signed this barbaric piece of legislation, cheering, clapping, people taking pictures, as this is such a great moment in our state and our country's history that we get to kill babies through 9 months of pregnancy.
Unbelievable. And just really a dark spot. And who would want to be associated with that kind of darkness, making a return in our midst? And yet, you're right, you have a group of people who just seem to congregate together in sharing this same problematic view of things. So, I think here, again, there's questions about how much can the church do that sometimes comes up. And I think the church does remain steadfastly one of the most, really the most pro-life voice out there. But at the same time, it is surprising to me, even in parish settings, that you do run into Catholics who, perhaps similar to what you're describing in your own journey, have not had an opportunity to really work this through, think it through, understand. And they're like, sometimes you got to have abortions. You got to have them available for people. Yeah, I'm a Catholic. And, so there's this reality that I think we do avoid some of these topics, even in parish settings, when we really do need to make sure that the parish is a great place to go deep, to be thorough, to share the fullness of the message, to not have any shame. And then I think we can all indeed very much be ashamed of the type of thing that just happened in Massachusetts by, as you were saying, a apparently Catholic governor passing it into law. So, the importance and the witness of the church is never to be diminished.
Mm-hmm. What we don't know is what the bishops did in terms of reaching out to the governor behind the scenes, which often happens, and they don't go around and advertise that. That happened. I was telling the story in my 2 cents segment before we brought you on, Father, about our previous archbishop, 2 archbishops ago, Archbishop Cardinal Maida, Adam Cardinal Maida, when Jennifer Granholm, the then governor, was running, or she was actually running for governor at that point, and she was a Catholic convert. And she was all about pro-choice, made a big switch and claimed she was pro-life, and then became, all about abortion. We found out later he met with her not once, not twice, but 3 times, telling her that you are putting yourself in harm's way and that this is against church teaching, this is wrong, this is intrinsically evil, didn't change her mind. And so, of course, she went down her own path, which she still continues politically today. So the church may be reaching out to these politicians, but as from a priest standpoint, and since this is your home state, what has this woman done in terms of her soul? Doesn't she put herself in harm's way with this if she's a Catholic?
Well, certainly. And I mean, God bless Cardinal Maida for doing exactly what you indicated. And I also remember Cardinal Burke would meet with politicians, Catholic politicians, who were going to vote in favor of the destruction of human embryos for research. And, you know, he met with them kind of behind closed doors. And again, I don't think he made a lot of progress, but we have to do what we have to do for the Lord, and we've got to leave the rest to the Holy Spirit. So, yeah, I mean, in Massachusetts, I don't know whether there were any particular efforts made in this direction. I didn't hear about anything, but I suspect that there very likely were. I mean, this is, you know, a major bill that brings tremendous harm to the whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so is your fundamental question is, does this involve risk to the soul of those who vote in favor of this? And the answer is, to the extent that this is done with full knowledge, full consent of the will, etc., this certainly rises to the level of grave sin, because it involves grave matter as well. And this is the kind of thing that, you know, if you are a Catholic lawmaker and hopefully you come to see the light and realize that there was, you know, a significant error made on your part as you voted for this, get to confession. I mean, clear the decks with the Lord Jesus. This is so important for us to make sure that we are right with him. And then, you know, all kinds of real healing can begin.
Speaking, you know, I'm speaking from experience. I remember when I was early on the secular media, I was doing pro-choice editorials. I should have been struck down by lightning. But if I can change, anybody can change. But you have to have a penitent heart, and you have to go to confession, because this is a grave sin. More with Father Tad when we come back, and we're going to be talking about another shocking, but then again, maybe not so shocking, attempt by doctors to take organs while people are still alive. We'll be right back. We are responsible for what we know, and given the amount of information that is available from the church, from wonderful priests like Father Tad and others who share the truth with us here on EWTN Radio, TV, and online, if you're a regular listener and you hear what we say, we are speaking truth from Christ himself, as in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. And you need, every single person, again, as I said, I am speaking from someone who drank the Kool-Aid for years, drank the left's Kool-Aid with abortion and with other issues, okay? And I had to go to confession more than once, and I had to do my own homework, not just as a reporter, but as someone who finally, only by the grace of God, started to take the faith seriously and realize how so many of us have been duped. And if you are hearing my voice this morning, and the beautiful voice of a very holy priest, very knowledgeable priest, and you do not know about these situations, you're responsible now for doing more about it. I'm not saying anything against, right, Father? I mean, am I saying anything incorrect?
Absolutely. And your message is a message, really, at the end of the day, of real hope.
Yes.
People need to understand that kind of change, that kind of conversion brings just the deepest satisfaction and peace of heart and really hope. No one is beyond God's grace. I think, look, if St. Paul could be converted the way he was, you know, from killing Christians to becoming this outstanding, I mean, God can do anything. So let us not limit him, and just let's put full faith. Let's have that mustard seed that, you know, changes everything.
Right. And this is why I talk about these stories, as gruesome as they are. Some people tend to ignore it and say, well, though this is only rare, it's not really happening, it's not that big of a deal. But it's a very big deal. And this is how these things are able to, inch by inch, month by month, year by year, school by school, parish by parish, just start seeping into our educational system, into the church, seeping, and take over.
Yes, seeping is the right word, because, Teresa, I think you and I and some of our previous shows have brought out a very important point, which is those who are advocates for this, it's not like they have this as a one-time attempt. They bring it up in, 1978, they try to pass a pro-abortion or a pro-euthanasia law, and then they stop. No. Every year they come back, year after year after year. And so it's seepage, as you say. Little by little, people get accustomed to, they're going to be trying again, they're going to be trying again, and pretty soon it becomes law. And then you realize what kind of horror has been foisted upon the entire society.
All right. And speaking of horror, this story sounds like something out of a Vincent Price horror flick. Death by organ donation. Doctors raise the possibility of retrieving organs from MAID patients. It's an acronym for medical aid in dying while they are still alive. Oh, my goodness. Father, tell us about this.
This is amazing. Believe it or not, there was some serious discussion about this in a very famous journal, a medical journal, the New England Journal of Medicine. And, some rather well-known bioethicists even saying, well, maybe because people are getting so used to the idea of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, and more patients are starting to say, hey, when I do this, I'd like to donate my organs. This is kind of I think for some of them, a way to lessen the guilt of the wrongness of killing yourself or asking your doctor to kill you. It sort of sanitizes it a little bit, makes it look a little better because, I'm going to be giving my organs. Isn't that heroic? Well, it would be heroic if you weren't killing yourself. Definitely. The church is open to the donation of organs, but you're not ever supposed to take your own life in order to make those organs available. The only circumstances in which you could donate an organ directly from your own living body would be when you have two kidneys and you donate one and you're doing it carefully, making sure you can survive okay still with just one kidney, that kind of thing. But this is a whole new twist. We have what's called the dead donor rule. And this has been on the books. It's something that's understood by everybody who's involved in transplantation. And it's like the person has to be declared dead. You have to have, compelling evidence that they have died. And then if they gave consent, it's okay to take organs. But the dead donor rule is now coming up for review. And people are saying, maybe we don't need to follow the dead donor. Maybe it's okay to actually kill people to get their organs, especially if the people said ahead of time that they wanted to do both euthanasia and organ donation. Then, what's to stop us from doing it? We got our consent. And this just shows that consent is itself needed for many things, but it is not the final stopping point in ethics. This mistake gets made frequently. As long as I give consent, everything's fine. No, if you're giving consent to something that is inherently disordered, intrinsically evil, that consent is not in any way binding upon others. Now, let me just throw in one little practical detail here, Teresa. People think, there's this kind of, it's going to happen. The person's going to get the prescription from their doctor for the toxic pills, and then they go home, they take the pills, and then their organs get taken. Well, no, it doesn't actually work that way. When you do this, think about it. If you were to kill yourself at home, and then you wait for the ambulance to come and get your corpse and bring it over to the hospital, by the time that gets there, a lot of your organs are going to be ischemic, we say, lack of oxygen, not going to be able to be used for transplant. So how do you have to actually do this? You got to go to the hospital and say, hey, I want a room right next to the operating room where the recipient is who's going to get my organs. And then I'm going to kill myself inside your hospital. And then all the hospital staff who are supposed to be supporting life, protecting life, get drawn into this, to your suicide, as you're going to take these toxins. And then the doctors are a little bit like vultures waiting in the wings to go in and quickly carve out your organs and move them to the person in the next room. So you can see that there are serious problems of what we call cooperation in evil, that the hospital, which has a mission of healing, is now becoming corrupted and pursuing the killing of the very individuals who they should be seeking to safeguard, protect, and heal.
We are talking with Father Tad Beholchek. Check out his excellent website with a great deal of helpful information, fathertad.com, Father, Tad.com, and also, of course, the National Bioethics Center. Father, we may think that this is something, okay, people are agreeing to this, they're making their own decisions, not that we would ever support that. But again, as with the issue of abortion, people think, well, we have to have some, availability of abortion, which is a complete lie because people have been basically duped in thinking that that is a healthy decision, which neither is for the baby or the mother, in addition, obviously, to the moral problems. But when you agree to, make an agreement with the evil one in terms of, so-called assisted suicide, euthanasia, abortion, contraception, all these things that the church calls intrinsically evil. The church does this for a reason. When you open that door, then you're on that slippery slope, and you're pretty soon going down that cliff straight to where. And we can see how first it starts out gradual. Oh, it's a decision. I wonder, and we may never know, how many people, God forbid, are, let's say, I don't know, cancer patients who still have plenty of life left in them, or someone who is in a serious condition where their life is taken, or the doctors are encouraging a so-called assisted suicide because they want those organs. That could be very possible, because once you start down that road, we see all these abuses that occur all the time.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, the slippery slope argument is an important one, and we see it every day, as it were, being played out in the medical profession and, more broadly in society as people make bad choices. But I think, it's also important to point out when the church says that something is intrinsically evil, what does that really mean?
What does that mean? Right.
There are no circumstances at all under which this action could be deemed good, right, proper, or fitting. And, people don't like that. They're always like, well, there's got to be some exceptions here and there. And this comes up in a lot of areas in medical ethics that you and I have discussed in the past, even in vitro fertilization. Oh, well, we can't have a baby, and the church says that doing IVF is intrinsically evil. It's always wrong. There aren't circumstances under which it can be justified. It involves very, very grave damages always, and the same here with abortion. There are many arguments that are strongly made on behalf of this, but they don't end up holding any water at the end. And we're in a situation where an intrinsic evil is directly damaging to our souls every time we do it, every single time, no exception. So if I just choose abortion once, damage has been done to me. If I'm a doctor who performs an abortion, my soul is damaged by that very action. And there's a need to, start looking at ourselves in the light of these intrinsic evils that have no good side to them.
And, we see so many cases of art imitating life. There's a movie, this came to mind, we were talking about this story about medical aid in dying and the organ donation, of which we're speaking today, Father. This movie that came out in 1978, and it was about an intern who all of a sudden noticed that all these healthy people would come in for minor emergencies, and they would end up disappearing, and they would end up basically in a comatose state. And she followed it up and realized there was this whole industry that was paying the hospital, in particular doctors, a lot of money to put these people in a comatose state so they could take their organs. If we think that couldn't happen, or may not be happening in some ways, I don't know how we could even think that, given how far we've gone in our world with the culture of death.
I agree. I think that those types of scenarios, even though they seem very sci-fi-ish, actually do have a basis for raising concerns among us. We need to be watching out and looking for signs of those things kind of sneaking around the corner and suddenly approaching. It's amazing. As I say, this article in the New England Journal of Medicine where they're saying we ought to be able to skip over the dead donor rule. Wow, you wouldn't have seen that.
The New England Journal of Medicine.
Yeah, even 5
Think
years
about
ago,
that.
You wouldn't have seen something like that.
Right. And if we don't think we're on a slippery slope, I just don't know. Father, as we close, we have about 2 minutes left. Let's talk about what we need to do as Catholics. Archbishop Chaput, I think, even though he's retired now, the Archbishop Emeritus Philadelphia, great teacher, very clear on church teaching and very good in terms of understanding the media and the culture. He's written many books about it. He would always say we need to know how the media works so they don't work on us, and they are working on us continuously. What's our responsibility in our knowledge of the faith?
Yeah, and I think it always depends on our state in life. I was just thinking of yesterday at the parish. I did give a homily here in Massachusetts on this issue of what the governor did. And people were grateful afterwards. They're like, thank you for speaking to this. I think sometimes we feel like, even as priests, that these things are so controversial, we don't want to bring them up from the pulpit. But it depends on our state in life. I think priests do need to speak about hard topics. You in the media, who have your own shows, I mean, you're doing a great job of this, Teresa, of getting the word out, helping people to think through some of the nuances and subtleties, but also maintaining the line of clarity. And the rest of us Catholics, who may be out in the pews, sometimes it's a matter of just starting a conversation with a coworker. Maybe you know a young woman who's in a situation of desperation, and trying to engage her and bring her to some of the wonderful work of, those who are providing, like, pregnancy resource centers that provide support and help after a baby is born, and maybe just talking about the possibility of adoption. I was just talking to somebody yesterday who has an adopted child, and she said, what a blessing. We adopted her at 9 months, and she's now in her 20s, and what a gift that's been to our family. To get people thinking in these terms so that we don't just say, I have to go right away to the abortion clinic. It becomes almost the default parameter. So I think each of us, depending on our state, the Lord is inviting us to take certain steps and to not be afraid. Have courage. Rely on Him. Lean on Him, actually. And know that whatever you're lacking, He'll make up for. That's the beginning, the seed of change all around us.
Father, thank you so much. I'm so glad you were on today. It was providential. I needed to hear your voice. Thank you so much, Father Ted Baholjek from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Check out his beautiful and very informative website, fathertad.com. We'll be right back. I'm speaking to you from the bottom of my heart, and someone who's been there and done that and who was duped for years. I was duped so badly that I, at one point, decided, obviously, I had to leave the secular media because it was so full of lies. And brothers and sisters, that was 26 years ago. It's 2026, and the media are worse than ever. I pray for them. I still have friends who work in the media and who are trying to do good, but it's increasingly difficult because of the agendas that have seeped in over the years and now taken over. Okay, talking about the culture, well, Father Mitch Paco will have more to say. For our cultural connections, I'm not sure exactly which particular issue he would like to cover. I kind of just leave that up to him and the Holy Spirit, obviously. The Holy Spirit decides for us as we ask for his intercession all the time. But Father Mitch is so well-versed in so many topics. And I'm not sure. Usually he lets me know tonight sometime or early tomorrow morning. But the reason is not that we're not planning ahead. We like to respond to what's happening in the world at the moment. So if you see a big breaking news story, and it's very impactful, for example, such as that horrific law that was signed earlier this week in Massachusetts, then you can come to us, an expert such as the amazing Father Mitch Pacwa or Father Ted Baholjek, and say, okay, they're going to explain this to me from a Catholic perspective and what this means for me as someone trying to be a faithful Catholic. So we'll see what Father Mitch wants to discuss tomorrow. And then Penny Nance joins us. I'm looking forward to this interview from Concerned Women for America, talking midterm elections. Have a great Wednesday. Talk to you tomorrow on a Thursday. Ciao, ciao.